I asked this question genuinely because I was very curious as to what people thought about the whole thing with Tim Scott being single. And I thought, and people got mad at me like this, for instance, this one guy, Troy, in my comments says, you're being a hypocrite for saying that someone that is different from you, that they must be questioned. First off, that sentence is not actually legible. That's not a literate sentence. That's and I like, most of the time people if they disagree, that's just a stupid sentence. What does it have to do with hypocrisy? That would only make sense if I were like divorced or single myself. I mean, words have meanings. Let's remember that. I'll respond to that later. He probably won't comment again though. But I think it's completely fair to ask this. Why does everybody get so butthurt when you ask a question? Honestly, I hate this modern society. You can't even ask a question without people on the right absolutely launching themselves into the volcano of PMS reactions. It is insane. You can't bring up the right can be just as bad as the left, and you know it. You can't ask a single question without people like freaking out. I think it's completely fine to ask, is it weird that he's single? I'm genuinely curious. I mean, I was interested in having an actual conversation about it. And there were a few people that were on, my side of thinking in terms of constitutional conservatism that are like, yeah, I think this is an interesting thing to talk about. It has nothing to do. By the way, I'm not saying that he's gay or anything else like that for all the people who apparently are limited in thinking. Because he was asked, this is why I bring it up. This is why I bring it up. When he first started running for office, and he seems like a nice guy, but when he first started running for office, he literally advertised himself as the 30-year-old virgin. He did. And no one else did that. There wasn't anyone in the media that asked him that. I wrote a piece and I've linked this in my piece that I wrote. He was the one who made that a big deal. And then later on, and this is why people got really mad about this, and this is why I actually brought this up in the first place. There was a Washington Post reporter who is writing, I think, something early on about 2024. And after Scott announced, they brought up this story where a few years ago, because Tim Scott's 57 years old now, when he was in his 40s, this reporter said that he had asked him, well, you started your career talking about values and morality and ethics. Are you still a virgin? And apparently Tim Scott was like, I'm not going to continue this question. Apparently the answer was no, though. So I'm just saying, no one else made that an issue because no one knew. He put that out there. Now, that may have been a bad move for him to have done, but you can't get mad at anybody in the media for asking. And I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry at all. We should ask these questions. People sit here and go, their personal lives are none of our business. I beg to differ. How fast we've changed from Clinton to now. Like, what happened with that? I always look at it like this. If a man can't handle his own home, he can't be handling the White House. Sorry, he can't. And the reason why I bring this up, and I'm not talking about kids or anything else. George Washington famously didn't have any children of his own. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is commitment. And another way of gauging someone's character. That's what I'm talking about. For the people who need, the drive-bys, who need cliff notes for basic conversation. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Because look at it like this. I was thinking about it. I find it concerning for a couple of reasons. Now, here's one. If he were to become president, which I don't think he has a shot, but for the sake of discussion, I think it presents a way for him to be compromised. What if he were to date or marry on the campaign trail? I mean, it seems really unwise to subject a new relationship like that to the fishbowl existence of the White House or the strain of a campaign. I mean, have you guys seen, and I had this link in my piece on Substack at Chapter and Verse. Have you seen the before and afters of everybody in the White House? Everybody like going back to the beginning of, actual photographs. Yeah, holy cow. It sucks the life out of you. Oh my gosh. They go in, they got a full head of hair. They maybe have a couple of grays. They have fat cheeks. They come out and they look like pieces. They look like they're beef jerky and their hair's falling out and it's all white. That like what happened? They're so stressed out. Can you imagine? By the way, the most perilous time for a marriage is the first 7 years. I'm just saying. Or if he's a single POTUS. Now, we haven't had a single president since James Buchanan. He was our first and only bachelor president. But what, like if they try to date, how do you surreptitiously get a lady up in a White House? Do they have to sign an NDA? Like, how does that work? Here's the other thing. One of the ways, and you can get mad at this or not, but be honest. One of the ways that society judges whether or not a man is successful is by the family that he's built. Just as we also gauge his character by his choice of wife. Like if his wife is a bully and she needles him constantly, if she's, if he's a pushover, if his kids have no discipline or respect, or if his wife is, like him and his wife fight, or, or if the wife is mean or whatever, then you're going to think like, you're going to wonder whether or not he's going to be able to stand up to geopolitical enemies if he can't stand up to a wife at home. I'm just saying. And some can wonder how family can be so important if a person who is seeking the top job in the land could not temper their ambitions to start one themselves. There were a lot of people asking this question, and I saw this all over social media, and I was incredibly disappointed to see some of the reaction to the questions. Like people genuinely asking questions about this. We have a culture war happening on the right, within the right. You can't even ask questions about this because we're trying so hard apparently to flatter, modern cultural secularism that we can't even ask a question about this. I mean, we're protesting secular society's declared war on the nuclear family, on fathers, and on men. But holy hell, you can't even ask a question about a single 57-year-old man and if that's going to be a concern for voters going into 2024. Apparently, you can't reconcile those two things for me. You see what I'm saying here? This is where I have that. I mean, are we really going to downplay the importance of the very building block of society to satisfy modern secularism? To satisfy our current cultural temperature. Are we not supposed to ask this question? People go, well, it's his business. Like hell. Like hell. You're running for the top office in the land. Guess what? All your business is our business. Why is it? Because you have the authority to send our children to war. Because you have the authority to tax us to death. Because you have a lot of authority. We are putting our futures and our livelihoods in your hands. So there is nothing that is off limits. And if you think there should be, then you are already saying that you are not up for the job. The end. Now, I think that a lot of the questions that came from this were actual, like mine is genuine, I'm inquisitive about, I'm curious about this. I know that humans have a tendency to trust the familiar. Do you know any committed bachelors in your life? People who've never had like publicly committed relationships? It's now, and I know some people were bringing up, I don't want to get into, I know you don't want a sermon, but some people were like, well, Paul says it's better. Actually, that's not what he says. If you actually read 1 Corinthians, and I addressed that in the post. I mean, he wasn't advocating for the single life in 1 Corinthians as though it was somehow better. In verse 7, he made it very clear that singleness as it pertains to celibacy is akin to a vocation and rather a personal decision that was brought about at the time. If you all remember, the time in which he was talking about this was a time of immense suffering and persecution for himself. So it actually was more advantageous for him to be single in devotion to his duty than to have a spouse. If you can live a godly life single, lead it singularly. If you can lead such a godly life as a married person, then marry or stay married. Paul does not lift up one better or more functional than the other. So let's get that straight right there. There's a lot of people who need to reread 1 Corinthians. Because I saw really nice, sweet people asking a simple question and then have their heads ripped off on social media. That was, again, really disappointing to me. We have every right to ask this question. You have every right to ask this question and not apologize for asking this question. You have every right to expect an answer to this question. Do not get it twisted, friends. These people are auditioning for the top job in the land to have authority over your life, and you are going to be made to feel bad because you're asking about personal commitments in their life? Oh, no. That is not how this works. You have every right to ask. It's your responsibility. That's just the way it is. Now, whether, like I said, Washington was, he's single. He didn't have kids. He was with Martha Washington. She had a child, I believe, previously, and he kind of, adopted her child, but he had no children of his own. There was a commitment there between, and I think that's something that is used to judge someone's character. So do you feel that you can make that decision? Does it affect you, especially when we're talking about defending the building blocks of society and we're talking about the importance of families, etc.? Can you believe that someone can share that if that has not been a priority in their life? And it's an honest question. For people who want to see some sort of judgment in there, then that's on your heart. And that's something that you have to deal with. But there are people asking genuine questions, and they deserve answers.